Hello everyone, in this video I am going to show you how you can create CLI programs so fast using this Python file library. So this library helps you to create CLI programs. So you can convert your existing Python files into CLI programs or utility scripts into CLI programs so fast using this Python file library. So before getting started in this library, then we can develop a simple CLI program without using any kind of third-party libraries. Then we can compare the development speed between those two approaches. Now we are going to create a very simple program very first before creating any CLI program. So I'm going to create a new Python source file here. So let's say I'm going to create a CLI Python file. So I'm going to edit it with my favorite text editor. So here I'm going to create a small function. So maybe function called add. So this function is basically for adding two numbers. So we are getting two arguments and we are just returning the summation of those two. And here we can simply run this one to try out whether this is working fine. To call this function initially, I am going to use the name variable, this name variable, just comparing with the main. So when this is executed, I can run some code here. Basically I am going to print the value of this one. Maybe I can enter like this. I am going to print with two arguments by entering two arguments to that function I created. Let's check whether this is working fine. So it is working fine, right? So just tested this function is working fine or not. So now we can try to convert this function, convert this script into some kind of CLI program, right? How we can convert this function into kind of CLI program? Assume that we are allowing this kind of command. So we can enter this script name and we can enter some command like add, and after the add command we can enter these two arguments, input arguments like this, right? So how we can implement this one? So there are several ways to convert this script into CLI program by allowing this kind of command line input. So first we can try to use sys standard library and convert this script into CLI program. And after that I am going to show you how you can convert productively convert this source file using this Python file library, right? So very first we are going to try with the sys standard library. We can try to import that sys standard library. So I am going to import sys. So this sys library contains argv list. So that list contains all the input arguments, input CLI argument to this process, this Python interpreter process. So we can use that sys.argv and extract this command, and also we can extract these parameters as well. So let's implement using this sys.argv thing. First we can print this sys.argv and check the output before implementing. So if we print like that, so I am going to print here. So this always contains one element, right? One element. So it is basically this one. So if we provide additional parameters, additional CLI parameters like this, then it gets added into this list, right? So this is index 0, index 1, likewise. Then using that way we can access those things. So index 1 means this add function, right? Add command. So if we use another thing, maybe multiply, mul, likewise, then it is getting added into the first index, right? So we can just compare this one to check the command, right? So let's check the command quickly. So I'm going to erase this print lines. The first argument is equals to add. So then we can assume that the user entered add command. So first argument is add. Then the user entered add command, add. Now we can try by entering add. So it worked, right? So using this condition we can check whether user entered add or not. So if we enter another thing like mul, so it don't print anything because this is not the add command, right? The user didn't enter add command. So here we can extract the CLI arguments, the additional arguments. So if we enter 10, 5 like two values here, then we can extract both values and execute this command, right? This function. So let's do that also. So here I can get the answer as add. Then if we check the list, our argument list, so very first we have the reserved one, reserved the Python file name. Then after that, in the first index we have the command. In the second index we have the first argument for this function. In the third index we have the second input argument for this function, right? So we can use like this. So since those are string values, we need to convert into integers. So I'm going to use like this, sys.argv, second input argument and third one. Oh, I need to enter here. Need to convert this one into integer as well. So here I have the answer. I provided these two arguments by converting into integers into this function. Then I got the answer, right? So just print this one. So got the answer. Let's try out this one in the terminal. So here I am going to enter add 10, 5. So it works, right? So what happens if I don't provide parameters here? It will probably throw errors, right? So then we need to check those things. So we just need to add a check. We can just check the length of this input argument. So input, if we check the length of input argument, it is always 1. If we don't enter any kind of additional parameters, then we need to check like this. If this is so first we have the reserved name 1, then 2, 3, 4, right? If it is less than 4, this length is less than 4, we can show an error message. You need to provide additional argument for the add command. Likewise, you can quickly enter like this. We can enter please provide required parameter, something like that. Then we can exit from the process with non-zero return value like this maybe. And if we try to execute this one again, it will show this error message and it will exit. So if we check the exit code of this process, the previous process, we can check using this one on Unix platform. So it is 1, right? So there's an error. So if we provide one argument, see what happens. Then we need to provide second argument as well, because the add function needs 2 arguments, right? So if we provide like this, then it works. So if we check the return code like using this one, so it is 0. It is executed successfully. So that's about how you can implement a CLI program without using any kind of additional third-party libraries. So this is about manually passing the input CLI arguments using this sys.argv list, right? So there are several ways to implement this one. So this is the very basic and minimal way to implement a CLI program with very simple actions and arguments. So what if you have more arguments and more actions? So one solution is to of course use this Python file. Then I will explain how you can use it, how you can convert this function without writing too much code to pass the input arguments. So what if you don't have this Python file library? So there are several ways to implement CLI programs without passing the arguments yourself. So one solution is to use this argv standard library. So you can use this one and implement CLI libraries. So the next thing is you can use this CMD standard library as well. So this is basically about entering commands in a kind of command loop. So in this example it shows like this. So you can enter multiple commands, like it is like command loop. You can enter one, then it will ask for another. Likewise you can enter those kind of things, those kind of CLI programs using this CMD library. So those are the solutions. So how we can build CLI programs very fast using Python file. Let's check about Python file. Then I am going to implement the same function, same function using the Python file library. I am going to convert this script into a CLI program using Python file library. Right now I use sys, but I am going to use Python file now. So how you can get started with this Python file library? Very first you just need to install this Python file library. So here I installed this Python file library using pip command, using this command into this computer. So now I am going to use it. Now I am going to implement the same thing we implemented, same CLI using Python file. Now I am going to copy this CLI py into another file because I need to modify using the Python file library. So I am going to copy the existing Python file. Now I am going to copy CLI into maybe a CLI file. So now I can modify this one. Here we did all these things to pass the input arguments, right? Input CLI arguments. So here we simply implemented the very simple CLI parser. We just compared the first input CLI argument and we checked whether it is matching with the particular command. Then we tried to get other input argument from this sys.argv list. So likewise we implemented the very simple CLI parser, right? So we don't need to implement these things ourselves if we use Python file. The Python file library automatically implements those things for you. So now I am going to erase these things. So I can erase those things. So earlier we used sys standard library, but now we are going to use Python file. So instead of sys, I am going to use fire. Now we already imported the Python file library using this fire token, right? So how we can convert this program into a CLI program using Python file? You just need to call one function. So the function is fire.fire. So that's it. Now this program is already converted into a CLI program. Now this script is already CLI program. But how it works? Now we can give a try by entering some commands in terminal. So if we try to run the latest program we created using a Python interpreter like this. So I'm going to execute CLI fire. So if you execute like that, you can just see some kind of help message. So it says that some information about the CLI program. It says that it accepts one command, so which is this add command. So if we try to enter add command to this process like this, so it says some error. Then these errors are automatically generated by Python file library. So if we remember the previous implementation, we implemented those validation related things manually, right? So we just implemented this one just to check whether the user entered all the related or required arguments into this add command, right? So this is added by ourselves, but if you use Python file, you don't need to add. The Python file library automatically add these things. So as we can see here, this add command related validation is already added, right? Already added. So if we try to enter maybe one argument to this one, so it says we just need two arguments, right? We just need A and B, two arguments. So if we try to enter correct input arguments like this, we can enter correct input arguments 10 and 5, then you will get the answer. So this function is automatically triggered by Python file library, right? Then what if you need to add more commands? Like assume that this program is a simple calculator, so we added add function, then we need to add subtract function. So if we implement subtract function like this, we can create another function called sub maybe. So we created sub function, just need to use minus token here, then how we can include this function also into CLI program. So if you use Python file, these functions are automatically added into your CLI program. So we can verify by just entering, just calling this source file. So in the help message we can see there are two functions now, add sub. So if we try to enter sub function without parameters, to that one also the validation is automatically added, right? We can just verify by adding correct parameters 10 and 5, then we are getting the correct value, right? Using this approach you can easily implement CLI programs, right? So if we so if we try to implement the same thing, this CLI program using the manual approach, you just need to add additional if condition, right? Then you just need to compare whether the command is sub or likewise, then you just need to validate. Then there are a lot of manual stuff going on, right? If you choose to implement the CLI program manually, so if you use argv or something like that, then still you just need to define these commands, right? So this is the command, this is the argument, you just need to define those things. So if you use Python file, you just need to define the function and you just need to call this one, right? The Python file library itself responsible for handling all the internal things. So internally it will load this module and it will check each function. Then if we check the internal of Python file library, we can just have a quick look. If we have a quick look into Python file library implementation, we can check maybe some file like core. So if we check the imports, the inspect library is used. If we check more about inspect library, the inspect file library is basically about inspecting the Python structures runtime, right? So this is basically kind of reflection library for Python. So it is used to inspect all the functions in the Python source file. So using that way, the Python file library inspect your program, inspect the current module, and it will automatically create or define commands for your CLI program. So that's how it basically works. So it is basically scanning your program when you call this one, then it is going to convert, or maybe it is going to implement automatically the commands for your CLI program by using these function names and by using these input arguments, right? So using this approach you can easily build CLI programs, or even if you have a legacy Python script, you can convert those legacy Python script into CLI programs by just calling this Python fire function. So that's about today's tutorial. I think you learned about how you can create Python fire based CLI programs instantly. So you just need to import Python fire, then you just need to call this fire function, then it will automatically convert or implement the CLI program using the existing definitions of functions, right? You don't need this manual way, or you don't need that argv or any other third-party library. So you just need to use this Python file library and convert existing files into CLI program. So see you in next video.